Alright, so that is getting one piece of data from the web. In this case, it's not exactly what we want yet. We don't want to just get like a piece of data. We want to try to utilize the structure and get all of this one type of data. So next thing we're going to do is, instead of finding just this one piece, we're going to get a list, an array of all the chunks of listings. So each one of these will be one kind of place in our array, and then we're going to loop through all of them and find the piece of information we want. We're going to do it the same way. The great thing about find all is it finds everything, right? In this case, we just had one thing, so we just got the first thing, but it can also be used to find a bunch of stuff. The first thing we need to do is actually find the kind of structure, the HTML structure, which contains all of this information. We don't want just this one piece of text. We want this whole frame. And the way we do that is the same. We just go to anything in there, inspect element. And I showed you this in the very beginning. We can go through the structure, see what's being highlighted, and just go to like the farthest out where it seems to contain everything. So it's clearly this. You're going to see that all these are the same. And there's some number of these. And each one of these contains one of these listings, right? And then we look at what the description of the structure is. In this case, it's a DL tag, and here's the class. Right? So it's all pretty well structured. We use the same exact structure here. So I'm just gonna get rid of this, and I'm gonna change this piece of code. Instead of looking for just that one piece of data, I'm gonna use this to find all of these structures. Okay, so I'm gonna call this listings. To make sense. And I'm going to say soup.findAll, and I just want to replace these names with the names I find here. So remember the structure here is DL, it's the type, and then the class is this weird thing. Don't worry about why they named it this way. But if you want text from here, you can right click and go edit as HTML. It's going to open this up in like a text box. We just want to like copy and paste this class name. And we're going to put it in here. Again, we don't care why they call it these things. That's just what they call them. That's how we can get into the data. So let's run that and see if we get the right kind of data. And how are we going to know that we got what we wanted? Well, we can ask for the length, right? We know there's a certain number of these listings on the page, so all of those listings should not be stored as separate elements in this array called listings. So if we ask for the length of listings of that array, it was 36, okay? Sounds about right. You can go through if you want to do a sanity check and just count all these listings. There's going to be 36. At this point we can print all these listings. It's just going to be HTML code. It's not really any better than what we started with, except fundamentally in the data is sets of information. And if we go through this, we would find there's these brackets and commas at certain points to split off these things into 36 chunks, okay? And once we have those 36 chunks, now we loop through them, just like we did through all the users in the Weibo data, and then we just use the same commands from before to extract the piece of data we want. Okay, so what I'm going to do is set up a loop and say for listing in listings. And this is going to loop through each one of those 36 chunks of HTML. And I'm going to, at this point, extract the information. So you can pick anything here. Here's the title, the price, the location, the size. You can do anything. I'm just going to extract the name. All right, so I want this piece of text. Go to inspect element. There's that text. Now you see here how the text is down here and there's all this space here, all this space here. This is what I'm talking about. You'll find things like this. If you use that strip function, then it'll get rid of all this extra space. That name is contained in two structures. First, it's contained in a P structure that has the name title, and then it's wrapped in this A structure, which is a hyperlink. Okay, so to get that piece of data, it's a little bit more complicated. I'll show you why. So first we're going to for listing and listings, We're gonna use the same code from before, so we're gonna pass it now listing, which is a piece of HTML. Instead of passing it the entire soup, we're just gonna pass it in that piece of HTML, which represents the one listing. Dot, we're gonna do find all, and we're gonna say P, that's the type, and title, that's the name. Alright, so far it's the same exact thing. Now the problem is we can't just ask it for the string, because it doesn't just contain one string, it contains this other structure. And the reason why we can't just ask for this A structure right away is because there's no class, there's no identifier. So what we're going to do is actually we're just going to find this tag, and in this tag there's going to be this other tag, and we're going to use a more general function. Just so you can see this, I'm just going to run this and print. Okay, now you see what it's done here? It's given us an array. Each time we loop through this, it gives us this chunk. It gives us that structure and then that link, and here's this text that we want. See all these spaces here? Junk. And to dive deeper into this, to actually find this link, or to find this tag in here, we're just going to use a very general function. We can daisy chain these together. Once we find that, we can do dot find all. And I'm just going to pass it this A structure. So it's going to find all the P class title, and then within that it's going to find all the A's. And I'm just going to take the first one, which will give us this piece of HTML, and then I'm going to chain onto it string, and then dot strip. You know, when I say find all, it's the same thing as before. It's actually going to give me an array. There's only one thing in that array, but I have to get the first one. There's a lot of these functions, so find all I've been using strategically to just not confuse you with too many functions. There's also find, it's a general one. There's find children, find children's, like they're all different functions of Beautiful Soup. I would suggest on your own time, just scan through this documentation. It's really nice because in these green parts, it'll give you example code of all the things that Beautiful Soup can do, okay? And it's a bit more complicated than APIs because you have to tailor your solution to what you find on the website. Okay, so at the end of that, you know, the setup is pretty simple again. You just find an array of listings, and then for each listing, you loop through it and find whatever information you want. Okay, so here's the name of each of the 36 houses. But in a similar way, I would just have one line for every other piece of information. So for instance, the price, I can have as a different one, and you know, you would just find that from looking at the structure of the website. I already happen to know what it is. And in the example code, there's other, you know, find children. You can like look through that and see if it makes sense. Here, I'm just gonna print. Okay, so now I have name, price.